right, good evening everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I am the Executive Director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are so excited to be here with all of you tonight to celebrate Imani Rituals, Nurturing African Spiritual Heritage. We're here with two of the three contributors to this book, the co-creators of this book. Ayana Kafi, who is going to be with us tonight, is not feeling well, so we're really holding them in this room with us and wishing they were here. Ayana grew up at Charis, and I have known them since they were a teenager, and so their spirit is very much in this space with us tonight. But we have their father, Dr. Anthony Stringer, here with us tonight. Dr. Anthony Stringer is Professor Emeritus at Emory University and a Fellow of the American Psychological Association and the National Academy of Neuropsychology. His award-winning research and teaching have taken him to Ghana, South Africa, and Rwanda. He served as lay minister of the Thurman Hamer Ellington UU congregation that centered the African American experience, creating contemporary rituals grounded in African spirituality. And we are joined also by Reverend Duncan E. Teague. Reverend Duncan Teague is lead minister and founder of the Abundant Love Congregation in Atlanta. He is an out black gay man recognized by Georgia legislators for his decades of HIV/AIDS research, education, and advocacy. He currently serves as vice president of the UU Ministers Association. He has worked in global HIV research at Rollins School of Public Health, Emory University. Reverend Teague and his longtime husband and companion of more than 30 years live in Decatur, Georgia, where we are tonight. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Abundant Love in case you are not aware. Abundant Love is a Unitarian Universalism congregation where you can bring your whole self, your full identity, your questioning mind, your expansive heart. Together, they create a force more powerful than one person or one belief system. As Unitarian Universalists, they do not have to check our personal background and beliefs at the door. They join together on a journey that honors everywhere we've ever been. So we're really excited to get to talk about this beautiful book that y'all have put together. We have some of your congregants in the room. We also just have friends, family, and we got great folks online as well. This event is being recorded, so folks who weren't able to be here tonight can watch it later. So why don't we put our hands together and welcome.
Thank you for a very kind introduction.
Yes.
During the introduction, Duncan's partner was mentioned, so that I don't get into trouble. I want to mention that my partner is here also. Beautiful wife, Sky. Important not
And
to,
we both married as children.
Absolutely. And continue to be children. All right. Well, we're going to do this very informally. I think the plan is that we have a period of time where we're just going to talk, and then we will have, questions from the audience, and then questions, I think, from online as well. So just to start off, just want to say a little bit about the book itself. So the word Imani is Swahili. It means faith. Ritual. I think it's maybe worthwhile just pausing and talking about what that word means. Duncan, what do you think of when you think of ritual?
I'm glad we're going there because while we were gathering, my husband, who's also an intellectual, of course, threw out this deep question. And he asked, what's the difference between ritual and habit? And I think we were very intentional in the book about saying that when we're talking about ritual, we're talking about you coming to it with intention. And so the coffee drinkers in the room have a ritual. I'm not going to argue about that because I don't want this to get violent. But aside from the habits of it, And I contend that the ritual happens when y'all go and you're out of coffee. But then the rituals start. But in the book, what we wanted to do was raise up the idea that ritual could be beneficial. It's a series of behaviors, maybe cultural behaviors, maybe societal behaviors, religious certainly, that you have put together in the frame of the book. It's based on African or African American cultural norms, and you come at it with an intention, hopefully of getting something out of it, maybe of also putting something into it. But it isn't accidental. In this case, it's not accidental, yeah, because I think I had an accidental ritual this afternoon. Because I turned on some music, and we talk about the power of music in the book, and the music took me into a very familiar set of rituals around the words, the memories, the people who came up for me. My husband and I are grieving the loss of his brother from less than 2 weeks ago, and other losses have come to me just from Olita Adams singing the right words, and I was in the right space, and I stopped. I was supposed to have been cleaning the kitchen, but I wasn't cleaning the kitchen. I was in a moment, and so the intention happened after the ritual started for me. But I think that's what we mean by ritual, I think.
Yeah, and so I'm going to lean into that a little bit, but also I think push back on the idea of ritual as habit. Because I don't really think ritual is habit. And maybe we should distinguish between stale ritual and vital ritual. And we're talking about vital ritual, in the book. And I'm going to read a passage, here. I'm going to try to read passages.
And of course, no members from Abundant Love have ever experienced
Of course not. Yeah. So this passage will be very familiar, and I think this is what's cool, what's key, to really vital ritual. We've all had moments when feelings welled up, spilled over, and overwhelmed us. That awe-struck gasp at the endless night sky. That unspeakable tenderness inspired by a lover's gaze. That celebratory joy when friends reunite after forced separation. That passion and purpose when a community stands together for what it knows is just and right. These are the very feelings ritual is meant to inspire. Not stale ritual, but vital ritual. I think it's not habit because if it really reaches those depths of feeling, those depths of emotion, then you've really encountered genuine ritual. And that's the purpose of ritual, is to make sure we reach into those depths over and over again. Anything to add, Duncan?
I'm thinking about one of the things that happened for me about getting into the depths of it, and also the conundrum of us being African American Unitarian Universalists. And that's a lot, and that's another book. But and there are several out there that I could recommend. But when ritual works, sometimes it works beyond our rational thinking. Because Olita sang, part of what pulled me in was she sang a song that was sang at my mother's funeral. It was one of my mother's favorites. And it was one of my father's favorites. And the theology expressed in the song, I don't completely share now. Mm-hmm. But it didn't matter. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to talk about healing, but something about her vocal quality, the energy that was put into the words and the music, and then whatever she and her band and her music director put into it, and then remembering that that had to be a song at my mother's funeral. She chose it, by the way. And all of that, even though I don't agree with every word of the song anymore. And I think that's how strong ritual can be.
And I think you're highlighting a vital element of ritual too. And that kind of touches into habit. You know, ritual, I think it calls to mind experiences, you know, that were meaningful to us in our past. So, you know, so there's always that element, I think, of remembrance, you know, in ritual. And yeah, I mean, maybe what we're remembering are things that we moved on from, but there's still things that manage to pull at those emotional strings. Yeah, and that brings comfort, I think, as well. All right, well, let's say a bit about how the book is organized, and then we're going to talk, I think, about why we wrote the book.
Sure.
Okay. So what's in the book? You know, we actually start off with just an introductory chapter that talks about some of the context that we're going to be getting into as we kind of go through this next hour. We talk about accessibility issues because we wanted these rituals to really be something that could be performed by people at a variety of ages, variety of ability levels, variety of mobility. And then we talk about the various types of rituals. So there are rituals that can be done individually, you know, in the privacy of your home or whatever. There are rituals that can be done in a family context, rituals that can be done in a congregational setting, and rituals that are more community-based. So that transcend individual church, but really touch upon shared community.
Also, there are some that would seem more appropriate based on a time of year or a holiday or something. But I think the way we wrote it, it's not dependent on that. And there are questions at the end that help, and it's Unitarian, so we have to put questions in there. And we have to not put answers in here either.
And so that's actually, so one of the limitations in terms of writing this book was the call from the publisher was for rituals that were not about the things you normally expect to have rituals for. So, you know, they weren't looking for wedding rituals, you know, for example. They were looking for rituals for unusual events, you know, situations that you might not immediately think of, okay, there's a ritual, I know that ritual for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was, you know, so there was all, from the very beginning, kind of a creative element, you know, to this, is to come up with something unique for unique and special situations.
I remember one contribution that Ayana brought strongly to it was about claiming or renaming what you call yourself as a ritual. And that's certainly something out of the African American tradition or African tradition. And Ayana brought it to us because she had witnessed, or they had witnessed, the power of that, especially among people who identify as transgender, and needing to change what they call themselves in a community. So not only are you personally involved in this for yourself, but you have a spiritual or supportive, I'm going to say psychosocial, political community affirming it and saying, on this day, we're going to recognize that name. And so you have some celebration or some significance around not only a personal choice, but a community choice to say, yes, we will affirm this for you.
Okay. So let's get into motivation and, you know, what I think each of us brought to this, you know, project. And let's start with Ayana. Yeah. And we can say anything since they're not here.
No, you can't. You can try, but I wouldn't do that.
So Ayana saw the original call, you know, for this type of book from the publisher. She knew that I had written an earlier manuscript that was not so much about ritual, but it was really more about theology, in Africa and the African Diaspora. And I have written a couple of books in my professional life, and a rule that I try to always follow and then didn't follow what that theology book was. The rule is before you write a book, have a contract. And whenever I've not had a contract, the book has ended up not getting published. So of course the theology book I didn't have a contract for and it didn't get published. But Ayana saw an opportunity, for a book similar to that theology book, but with a contract up front. So she really brought this idea, I think, or they really brought this idea to us, and that was kind of the beginning of this project. And I will say, I hope that that they share this motivation with me, and that is that it was just really cool to be working on something with my daughter. Ayana and I, wrote a children's book for just for the fun of it when she was a little girl. And I actually think Ayana did the pictures and I did most of the words at that point. But it was just something I felt so proud of because I was doing this with my daughter. And so a big part of my motivation was that this was also a project that I could do both with my daughter, but also with a longtime friend. So Duncan, why did you write this book and what did you bring?
I wrote it because y'all asked me to.
We had to have a minister,
Which is not the whole story, y'all. I am ordained. I am now in full fellowship as a UU minister. Thank you.
That's actually deserving of applause.
Yeah, I took the long road. And actually, spiritually, I took a very long road. But Ayana is now in ministerial formation with UUs. And Dr. Tony Stringer has revamped what it means to be a lay minister in our movement. So I'm not the only minister on the cover. I'm the one, with the church and all that stuff. But my calling to ministry, to being asked to perform ritual, goes back a little ways. And so I'm going to read the dedication I have to the book because I think it explains that in some ways. And the two women who I mentioned bribed me and very easily with good food. When I came home from college in 19, and none of your business, and I was getting my degree in theater. I was pretty sure that following in my father's footsteps was not what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure if I was being called that way or not. I didn't care. I wanted, and by the time I left college, I graduated, I'll go ahead and name it, 84, and HIV was already starting to rage, and there's already being, not as well as I understood later, but there's already starting to be a response from the Black church about it, and I did not like that response. But anyway, I dedicated my participation in this examination of rituals to Sister Kizzy Ricks and Mother Delcy Jackson, two senior African American women and church mothers at Westminster Baptist Church in Kansas City, Missouri, where I'm from. They saw my ministry as real and important long before I heard the call. And I'm grateful for the Westminster Church, where my father, now retired Reverend Russell Teague, pastored with the dedication and support of his of my late mother, Alice Jean Teague. And my childhood spiritual home was a foundation for who I became as I grew up and embraced Unitarian Universalism. Finally, I'm grateful to, of course, Dr. Tony and Ayana Coffey Stringer's invitation to contribute to the book. What the bribe was Sister Mother Jackson and Sister Ricks took me out to dinner, fed me like a king, and I'm sitting there just smacking my lips and enjoying all this food. And the pecan pie, if you're gonna bribe somebody, use pecan pie. And they said, well, Duncan, I hope you enjoyed the dinner. I said, I did, thank you so much. And thank you for supporting me being in school. And they said, oh, that's not what this is about. They said, we want you to come back from college and accept your call to ministry and help your father out.
Oh.
And I was like, do what? And I was brought up to be polite to my elders. So I ate the pie. I said thank you. And I never told them how shocked and somewhat appalled I was. Because I was not ready at that moment. And I was actually headed out the door of the black church. Not so much in that moment, but I was certainly moving toward the exit. So that I'm included in a book about rituals now that includes some of the traditions I grew up with, and certainly some of the things that I experienced from my work in HIV that took me to Kenya twice. Not a bad job. I'm real grateful for that.
So for me, you know, there are a lot of factors in terms of why I wanted to write this book. You know, it completely, so despite what Duncan said, I am not a minister, you know, and I'm very clear that ministry is not my calling.
I'm gonna write that book. Tony Stringer is not a minister.
That's right. I'm not a minister. And part of, you know, what attracts me, I think, to Unitarian Universalism is that it does have lots of opportunities for people who are not ministers to be engaged in ministry. You know, and I think that's, you know, the way I kind of conceptualize it. But part of the motivation for writing this book was wanting to bring more of myself to my church experience. You know, Unitarianism is very much a white denomination, you know, though the influence of persons of color, I think, is really quite strong, and you know, and it's growing, you know, all of the time. I think the influence, you know, extends beyond the actual physical numbers of people. But for me, bringing my whole self also means bringing traditions, you know, from the church of my parents, but even going back further than that, you know, and reaching back to my encounters with traditional African spirituality. And those encounters are challenging, you know, for me, because I'm also very much a scientist, and that's really the way I think. And a lot of those traditions don't fit real well, you know, with a scientific frame of mind, or with, you know, or just with modernism, or, you know, or postmodernism, if we want to, you know, get even deeper, you know, into that discussion. So this was an opportunity to re-envision those traditions in a way that fits more with contemporary life. So the rituals are not African, the rituals are African inspired. You know, and I will, you know, I won't read this passage, but I'll just relate a story that happened to me on a trip to Rwanda, where I was there really to teach, you know, to do a course. You know, I will say, you know, very proudly that myself and my colleagues have opened the first doctoral program in my field in sub-Saharan Africa in Rwanda. And so I was teaching as part of the beginning of that program. And I got to travel around the country some and meet a number of people. And one of the people I met was a gentleman named Epa Benamungu, who was probably the foremost artist, you know, in Rwanda. And we had dinner. And we started talking about the experiences we've had where we were driving through, you know, mostly rural areas, and children would line the road and would point, you know, at our car and go, "Nzunga," you know, and they were mostly pointing at my white colleague, you know, who was traveling with me. And so, you know, I first thought that, you know, Nzungu means white person. But Epa told me that it actually meant me also. And, you know, what the word meant, you know, is someone who has traveled far from home. That included me. And I was a little bit taken aback by that because I thought it had really multiple meanings. But I started talking to him just about what it means to be African American, and we got into the history of my family. And I told him about the rape of my great-grandmother not long after she was emancipated. And this man, this artist, he's someone who at firsthand had experienced genocide in Rwanda. He had to flee the country, to save his life, and he spent several years in Congo until it was safe for him to return. And now he's become very prominent in Rwanda. And in his sharing his experiences of being in a genocidal situation, that was very moving to me and very very frightening in lots of ways. But as I'm telling him about the rape of my great-grandmother, he starts crying. And I was just taken aback by that he is emotionally upset and engaged around something that happened generations ago. And this is from someone who's experienced, really trauma that I can't even begin to imagine. And he looked at me after that and he said, I will never call you Nzungu again. He recognized the commonality of pain. There's a common denominator throughout Africa, throughout the African diaspora. So there is that connection there. As an African American, I don't feel African, but I still feel a kinship. Some of that is through trauma, some of it is just recognition, of elements of African culture, that are part of my experience as an African American as well. So seeing that resonance, and then for me wanting to bring that again into a kind of a contemporary context was why this book was so important, for me to be involved with. So. All right, we've talked for about 30 minutes.
Doctor, can we just have a moment to clap for you? You paused for us to clap for Reverend Duncan when it was announced this major milestone that he did. But you said that you started the first what? You started the first what? Where? I mean, you could say it again and then we can clap. Please.
So first I should say this is a collaboration. So I and colleagues, or colleagues and I, we started the first PhD program in neuropsychology in Sub-Saharan Africa, the only PhD program in neuropsychology in Sub-Saharan Africa, a place where there is a heavy neurological disease burden. There's one neurologist, in this room. You are 1/3 of the neurologists in Rwanda, numerically.
Wow.
So there's a need for many disciplines to address some of the neurological issues, in Rwanda and frankly in a number of African countries. So if you want to apply for that, please. Thank you. Maybe we'll just interact around one more question, and then we'll open it up to audience participation, if that's okay.
That's great.
Okay.
Duncan.
So I wanted to ask, Duncan, your favorite ritual.
Duncan, will you hold your mic super close to me?
Sure. Oh, wow.
Put some bass in it.
Yeah, put some bass in it. Okay. ER, don't start. My husband's here. I think aside from some things that we intentionally do at Abundant Love, I love the rituals around healing. I'll bet that has a lot to do with what's going on in our country politically and socially. I'll bet. There is a whole chapter on healing rituals. Some of them echo some of the things I said earlier. I love the point about in the book that medicines cure, rituals heal. Sometimes you need healing even if you don't experience the cure, or sometimes even if you do experience the cure. And the ritual brings into your personal experience of illness the community, or someone that you love and care about. It also, if any of you have, and I'll bet, I don't know how it's possible, we all know somebody who has had cancer. Or we may in fact be survivors ourselves, or I hope to God you're working toward becoming a survivor. I am a survivor. And one of the things in the chapter on healing we talked about was that though the identified patient, that's from the medical world and from the chaplain world, is the person with the illness, but they aren't the only people who need to be addressed. Mama, daddy, siblings, the partners of, the children of, all of those folks have to be addressed. And if it's a good medical facility that we can afford, hallelujah, those people are included in the medical treatment. The rituals on healing are about that whole support network. And family, of course, in the context of Charis books, would be whomever you need to be family. Whether they share a last name or DNA or they don't. I'm sitting here looking at some people who were family for me on this ancestor portrait behind me. I just will read the general conclusions across dozens of studies about rituals of healing. It helps to get rest. It helps to hear music. It helps to be touched. It helps to be touched. I said, for those online, it helps to be touched. It helps to imagine your own healing. It helps to know people care. It helps to have a larger purpose in life. It helps to have a larger purpose in life. And then it's a comma, and then it says, even when you are ill. We could have just put a period after the word life, but I didn't edit the book.
So my favorite ritual is one that I began with my daughter, and again began in her childhood. I wanted her to know her ancestors, and so we created a ritual that we celebrated the ancestors' birthday, even after they were no longer with us. So we celebrated the birthday by lighting a candle, pouring a libation, my telling them, she used the pronoun her then, but telling them the story of the ancestor's life. When we got to the one ancestor that Ayana knew, which was her grandmother, my mother, it was an opportunity for her to share her memories of that ancestor. And the magic of that, was discovering that she and I had common experiences with my mother. One of those experiences was playing cards for money.
All right, Grandma.
Which is how my mother routinely won back my allowance. What I never figured out, but what Ayana figured out, was that the reason my mother was so good at cards was that she cheated. So she bamboozled me, but she couldn't bamboozle her granddaughter. So we celebrated, we celebrate, those kinds of memories about each ancestor on their birthday, after they're gone. And I believe that's something that Ayana continues to do now with her daughter as well. So that ritual is in the book, and that is my favorite ritual. Though Ayana is now, has family of her own, house of her own, I still continue that ritual, just as a way of remembering, those ancestors and maintaining that connection. All right, let's open it up to questions, either online or from you guys.
While you're forming a question, I want to be specific about my answer. When we lost Bob, my brother, and somebody's given me a new word for him, brother-in-love instead of brother-in-law, because he certainly was not just a legal brother, but wonderfully generous and kind to me. When we lost Bob Saturday ago, I also experienced 3 other losses from people not as close as Bob, but close to me. And something in the book recognizes that we carry in our bodies stuff. And so I was, I think, doing all right, but I wasn't feeling good, right? And I didn't feel better. And I think I also could have my moment with Olita Adams today because I went to my massage therapist. And something about the music and the smell we chose, he was out of my scent. I gotta go buy him some. Anyway, but we chose something that would work, and it was cardamom. And the music and having him knead me like dough. And I was completely passive during the entire massage. Afterwards, I felt different about the losses. So that's why I repeated, we might need to be touched. In the book, we recommend that that is somebody you know and you have a loving, trusting relationship with. And for me, I've known my massage therapist longer than I've known my husband. So yeah.
Oh, she can.
You sure?
Yeah,
Okay. So, as you continue this journey of life, do new rituals show up regularly? And like, and then when do they become, like, how do you know it's a ritual? Like when does it become a ritual? Like you have an experience and you do something. Does that one time make it a ritual, or is it that it's repeated? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, for me, and maybe I'll answer the question a little bit differently, and that is that for me, I ritualize an experience that I want to replicate. You know, so I think the experience comes first, and it's an experience that's powerful and moving, and one that after I encounter it, I know I can't live without having that experience again. So I would create a ritual, you know, that one pulls me back into that situation. And sometimes it means going back to the place where that experience happened, and that's the place where the ritual needs to be performed. But yeah, I ritualize experiences, you know, that I want to become a regular part of my life.
Duncan, without Reverend on it, I would do similar things. But Reverend Duncan and all Reverends, yeah, I'm going to say this on camera, just so you know, it's a professional sort of habit or technique. We beg, borrow, and steal from everything that's happened to us. And so if we were in a worship service where somebody did something as part of the service at work, oh yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to use that. And it could be something that that sometimes some of the other folks have to say, I need that ritual. Because we started as a very adult community at Abundant Love, I wasn't doing Story for All Ages. And very quickly, parents and some other members said, Duncan, we need to have Story for All Ages. And they are for all ages. Because Sunday, a visitor came, his first time there, and the Story for All Ages, which I made up, had his name, and he thought that his wife had called me and made up the story for him because he was coming.
That's funny.
And he was not a child.
Prophetic vision is what that is.
So Yeah, and by the way, we've all had to adapt our rituals based on things that happened to us. The shutdown changed the way we did a lot of things, and how we chose to connect with each other, and how we had to do rituals different. I went to installations of ministers. Typically, we laid hands on the minister. During COVID, nobody wanted that discomfort. So we changed how we did it. And I think we've become more inclusive after COVID. I mean, the people in this room are wearing masks. And so far, I didn't see any rustling about it. Not in this case.
One of the points I guess to make too is that, you know, the rituals are all meant to be points of departure. You know, the rituals in the book are not things, you know, that are meant to be practiced the same way every time, you know, regardless of what the circumstances are, regardless of who you are. You know, they're all meant to be, to illustrate kind of some core concepts, some core ideas, but they're meant to be points of departure. And I will say too, I mean, you know, the rituals are not just for African Americans. You know, there are some rituals, you know, in the book that would be very weird if you were doing it if you were not an African American. But there are many, many rituals. I'd say at least probably 2/3 of the rituals, you know, where there is an invitation to do them, either with African Americans or to do them because you want to honor this type of spirituality. And because you recognize the universals, you know, and the particulars of African spirituality.
My question is, at the beginning, we began with talking about intentionality behind ritual. And of course, I don't want to say of course, but I definitely agree. But as we've been continuing on and talking about song and how sometimes the singing of it can stir into ritual, it led me into thinking of how so often a song or something else can stir it, and it has nothing to do with the intentionality. And it's not until, and I'm also thinking about how sometimes I believe, doing ancestral things that like ancestors might have had in our bodies to know to do as a ritual when something has happened. And I'm also thinking about recently encountering my own grief and finding myself needing to do practices around cleaning to help me move through it, as an example. And I know that there are many other things that people might find themselves doing without consciously thinking about it or no intentionality. And so I'm curious to if that kind of thing have been addressed in the book, or if you have thoughts about when that moment where you're maybe observer is like, wait, something is happening here. Is it like that? Like maybe there's a ritual that's happening. Could you speak to that? Yeah.
Yeah. So the very first ritual I did, I think I was in elementary school.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like this story.
Yeah. Does everybody remember the safety patrol?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if they have safety patrols anymore, but they do.
Okay.
Well, you know, back in the day, it was a very sexist institution. You know, there were only safety patrol boys. You know, there were no safety patrol girls. So my first ritual, you know, was during my experience as a safety patrol boy. And when I tell the story, I always have to preface it by saying, no child was harmed. Yeah, and you'll see. I mean, there's tension to this story, and you need to understand that it ends up absolutely fine. You know, the little girl is alive and well. But I was captain of the safety patrol, you know, and that meant that I wandered from corner to corner to see if there was any corner that was uncovered on a particular morning. And this was in Detroit, you know, where the weather was bad, and so there were times when corners were uncovered. So there was a particularly busy corner where there normally are 4 safety patrol boys, and it's busy because there's so much traffic, but also it's right across the street from the school. And children build up on this corner, and they're anxious to get to school, particularly when the bells rings, because they know that 5 minutes is going to be another bell and they're going to be late. So they build up at this corner. Well, I got to that corner where there should have been 4 Safety Patrol boys, and there were none. So this is a very dangerous corner. Again, this predates even when there were adults, who sort of helped the Safety Patrol. It was all kids running this operation. So I took over the corner, and I held out my arms and, held the kids back. And so the kids started chanting. They started chanting, "Say walk, say walk, say walk," over.
It's
and over
Detroit, though.
and over. And I mean, literally the kids were backed up further and further, and the traffic was just unrelenting. And there was just no way of getting across the street. The bell rang, the chanting got louder, and this one little girl got right in my ear and was just saying, "Say walk," over and over again in my ear. And I'm an elementary school kid here, remember, and so I looked down at her. She was younger than me, but I figured she understood sarcasm. She did not. So I looked down at her and I very sarcastically say, "Walk." And it's a street full of traffic going in both directions.
Oh,
So the little girl steps out from behind me, and I'm looking at her and I'm like, surely she sees all these cars. Somehow she just starts heading, it just makes a mad dash into the traffic. So I hear this horrible screeching sound. I want to say again, no child was harmed in this story. I hear this horrible screeching sound. The traffic in both directions completely stops. It is completely silent, just like it is in this room right now. And I look, say again, no child was harmed. The little girl is underneath the car. I stop breathing. And a moment later she crawls out, completely unharmed, not a scratch on her. Scared to death, but physically completely unharmed. I am stunned. I am shocked. I am so disgusted with myself, I don't even know what to do. I barely get through the day at school. She's fine. She goes on. I don't know what I'm going to do. Do I resign? Is there some punishment severe enough to take away this guilt that I'm feeling? I've apologized to the little girl. I've apologized to anybody who will listen to me apologize. That night, I crawl into the bathtub, turn on the water, only the hot water, fill up the tub to the point that I'm literally submerged, in this hot water. I turn it off, and I just lay there. And I let the guilt, the shame, the self-loathing at this point kind of soak out of me. And I unplug the drain, laying there as the water slowly goes out. I lay there until all of the water and also all of the shame and guilt are gone. I learned my lesson. I've never done any irresponsible thing again in my life. Because even if I'm tempted, I think about that little girl. I'm sure that was an experience. It's formative. It made me who, in many ways, I think who I am. But I created a ritual. I have absolutely no idea where that ritual came from. Nobody knew I was doing this ritual. I'm sure I was pretty red when I got out of that tub, and my mother probably would have been appalled if she had seen me. But I created a ritual that allowed me to move beyond and to move on. That's the closest thing I've ever seen to a miracle, that girl was not harmed. I have absolutely no idea how she ended up under that car without a scratch on her. And I can only hope and pray that the trauma of that experience also didn't leave a scar, with her. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, rituals just come to us, I think, sometimes naturally, even as children. Yeah, even as children. So perhaps there is some ancestral memory there, that leads to ritual when we need it.
So have you used that ritual at other times in your life?
Fortunately, I told you I've never done that. Yeah, no. I'd probably be psychologically healthier, if I didn't take responsibility for everything happening in my environment. But I am the person who's responsible. Even if it isn't my fault, I'm going to act like it is. And so no, I've not submerged myself in scalding hot water since that experience, but I haven't needed to.
Sonia, you have a question?
I was just holding the mic.
You're just holding it?
Yeah.
Okay, we got a question back here.
You were ritually holding.
Exactly.
We might need to go around it.
Sorry.
Okay. You mentioned the rituals are African based. So I'm wondering, is it more African American people who are descendants of Africa? Or if there's a particular culture in Africa, tribe, country that they're born from?
You mean the rituals?
The rituals in the book.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think they really. It's all sub-Saharan Africa, but they draw upon different, different ethnic groups. And the introduction to each ritual talks about the specific ethnic group that the ritual is drawn from. So we do identify the culture. But it's true of African Americans. I mean, we bring the continent with us. I mean, yeah, there are parts of the continent, that contribute more, to our gene pool. But if you've ever done any of the genetic testing, that's available for African Americans, you can sort of see so much of the continent reflected, in your gene pool, even if it's a small percentage. But we draw from really all of sub-Saharan Africa. But again, all the rituals are only inspired by what we found there. They are not identical with any rituals that are in Africa. I mean, try to be really clear about that.
Thank you.
And also, out of fairness to our movement, it is predominantly white. It comes out of a white post-Christian now, and we were founded in Christianity. Unitarians, I know that there are folks who would argue with me and beat me down for saying this, but Unitarians were Congregationalists who were Christian. Universalists were Christian. They believed in universal salvation. So we come out of that tradition. In writing the book, we knew our particular place in our movements and how we need rituals that affirm where we come from and how to bring those into this very liberal hodgepodge of not just Christianity, but now all sorts of faiths. And so we wrote it as friendly as it could be and as honoring as it could be. And about the other question, I just was thinking about something that happened to me in high school. Crystal Cherry Powell now, she was Crystal Cherry, was the cute girl and I was her gay friend. And we are still close, but when I went off to college, Crystal stayed in Kansas City and maintained her relationship with Butch, and she and Butch had a child. Toward the 8th and something month, right, I'm talking with Crystal on the phone, and she says, the women in the room who've had children will understand this. Duncan, I'm due in a couple of weeks. I think I need to clean up this house. And I'm like, really, Crystal? Oh yeah, we need to clean up this house. Now, I think it's bigger than African American, but in African American culture, when a woman says she's got to clean the house, you need to get the bed ready for the baby. I didn't know this. I went over to Crystal's house and we cleaned like we were professional maids. She came to my house after we were cleaning and she had lunch with my family. And my mama says to Crystal, well, Crystal, when is this baby supposed to come? And Crystal said, well, I've still got a week or so. And my mother just said, I had no idea that there's this ritual of cleaning the house just before the baby comes. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from Crystal, and she says, Duncan, you're an uncle now. I said, I'm a what? She said, oh yeah, I was in labor, and it got worse, and so the baby's here. I said, you mean the baby could have come while I was cleaning? So to answer your question, there are these rituals or things that are known in the culture and not everybody knows, and you could just get in it. I was like, and when I told my mother, she said, oh, you were over there cleaning up for the baby? I said, no, I was cleaning up for Crystal. That's got to be bigger than African American.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's the,
Thank you both so much for the stories that you are sharing that have led to rituals in your lives, where you have these experiences and then sort of make something from it. And my question, I'm sort of wondering if you sort of flip that a little bit, like how might you go about, or what would you talk about maybe some of the elements if you were to create a ritual, choose to create a ritual because of something you want to mark, that's coming up, that, in the future, or just that you want to add to your life if you wanted to create a ritual to, help bring your family together, or maybe your family is having a child, or, you want to mark a significant event that's coming up at the congregation. What would go into your thinking? How would you go about that?
Well, I'm a little tickled that you asked that since I did your wedding. And so I hope that the intent is made known, said out loud, and that's not held in secret, so that you get what you really need, and that you consider the needs of the people who are going to be there. When I do memorials, and especially for Unitarian Universalists, I will ask who important is going to be there. Because some part of the service has to speak to some of those folks who aren't you. So we might have to stretch a little. We might really have to say a prayer out loud so that somebody else can hook on with their grief in the midst of the ritual. So I would say that I hope that it is as generous as can be. And then also the how of it. Is it celebratory? Is it healing? Is it, and we tried to make that intentional throughout the book. What are we doing and how are we going to do it? David's brother has asked that we not have a funeral. No official service. But he did give us permission to do something else. I'm glad I wasn't in the room, because afterwards I would have said, well, it's not for him anyway. And that might sound kind of catty, But funerals are not for the body or for the person who died. They're for the grieving family and friends. And for some of those people, they gotta hear Jesus or Buddha or Shiva or whoever, even if the deceased didn't need to hear that. And like the funny part for me, I'm gonna, Dana, can I use you?
Yeah.
Okay. So of course I'm a mad queen. I'm doing their wedding. I want Dana in that white lace armor, you know, and the veil and the whole thing. And Dana's like, no, Duncan. And she said, and as a matter of fact, I'm wearing my cowboy boots. Well, it's not my wedding. In fairness, it's not her first wedding. And she wants to wear her cowboy boots. Okay, we're affirming brides in cowboy boots now. Because it is for her.
You know, and just to, you know, add a little bit to the same story, when we were meeting and planning this, and you asked what you thought you should wear, what we thought you should wear, and you were sort of leaning towards a suit, and I said, you know, and I at that point did not know you nearly as well as Dana did, but I just said that, no, not that. That's not you. I want you to be you. And you didn't wear a suit.
Can we end with one final passage?
Yes.
From this? Okay. This is a little bit long. It's 2 paragraphs, but this is from Pope John Paul. This was from a visit he made to Ghana, and this is it's part of his speech while he was there. Africa has something distinctive to offer to the world. A vision of the world where the sacred is central. A deep awareness of the link between creator and nature. A great respect for all life. A sense of family and of community that blossom into an open and joyful hospitality. Reverence for dialogue as a means of settling differences and sharing insights. Spontaneity and the joy of living, expressed in poetic language, song, and dance. All these aspects manifest a culture with an all-encompassing spiritual dimension. That is what makes the African culture unique. Each nation brings to the family of nations its own cultural contribution. And through the legitimate expression of values and traditions, there is possible a harmony among peoples that transcends partisan differences, prejudices, and rivalries. Such a harmony, built on respect for and openness toward the values of others, in particular their moral and spiritual values, facilitates the possibility of concerted action on problems that extend beyond the borders of individual nations. Africa is called to bring fresh ideals and insights to a world that shows signs of fatigue and selfishness. We need every culture's contributions to save the world. And that includes Africa.
So I want to thank you all so much for being with us tonight and for sharing your beautiful words from this book. I want to thank everybody who's in our audience tonight, both online and in person. If you would like to order this book, if you're online, you can do so. And for all of our folks who are physically here, we have books up front. You can buy your copy. I am sure that these gentlemen would love to sign it for you, so I'll bring them